Okay, can I get you to say your first and last name, please?
Harry Snodgrass.
Sounds good. Move this all out of the way. You good? Okay. All right, sir, let me just tell you a little bit about what we're going to do first. So you have a real comfort level. Stop me anytime, and we'll go at your pace. We're going to talk a little bit about you, where you're from, where you grew up, how old you were. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted.
You enlisted. Okay, a little bit about why you enlisted and what happened. And the key elements that I'd really like to know, with our liberators especially, would be what you knew when you were going in, what you were told from your superiors, what you had suspected, what you knew, were you even prepared for what you saw? Then when you saw what you did, initial feelings and reactions, and then we'll talk a little bit about what happened after and when you came back here. At any time you want to stop or go back or reiterate a point, this is very informal, feel comfortable to do that. Yeah, we're covered. I told you everything. Okay, so tell me a little bit about where you grew up.
I was born in Johnson City, Tennessee. And I moved to Elizabethton, Tennessee, which is about 7 miles away, in 1939, and I was 15 years old. My daddy worked at a rayon plant up there, and I worked at various things and went to school, and then I went into service when I was 20 years old. And the reason I went in, nearly everybody else was gone. Well, I sort of felt foolish being by myself. I mean, I wasn't by myself, but I decided I'd just go on in. And so I was sworn in, I think the day I was 20 years old.
You joined the Army?
And went to Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, and they sent me to Camp Forest, Tennessee, because just, I forget what now was going in at Fort Oglethorpe, but at Camp Forest was taking white volunteers and black draftees at Camp Forest, Tennessee. That's the reason I was sent there. And then when they swore me in, I was sent to Camp Breckenridge, Kentucky. That's, I guess, the nearest pretty good sized town to that is Owensboro, Hendersonville, Kentucky. But it's a brand new camp, mud, just thousands of acres, of course. And we trained there from, we went in like October the 20th. Well, we trained there until near the 1st of April. And then we came to the Tennessee maneuvers. That was at Cumberland University. That was the 2nd Army headquarters. And I was the driver. And so we had tents on the Cumberland University ball field there. And we would take anybody that was in 1st Army, wherever they wanted to go, and bring them back. So all we did is just drive all over. I know that I went far as Cookville. And then north, I went way beyond Gallatin. I know south, I remember this distinctly, I went to the Jack Daniels Distillery. That's at Lynchburg.
I've been there.
That's the only time in my life I've ever been there, but that's what I did. But Lieutenant General Friedendahl was the commander of 2nd Army, and I drove him one day because they picked me out of the company. I looked the best that particular day now. But anyway, they picked me to drive Lieutenant General Friedendahl. And he was a 3-star general, and I had to take him to Smyrna, to the airport out there, and pick up the man that was commander of the Brazilian Army. So we had to put 4 stars on that car, staff car. So that was
You
my...
feel a little pressure driving that car?
Well, maybe a little bit. But we were around a lot of rank over there. For the 8 months that I was in England, I drove a full colonel, and he was on General Bradley's staff. And all these officers on his staff lived where General Bradley lived, in this big home out in the country. And I seen General Bradley nearly every morning. He'd be walking outside the house, and I'd speak to him, salute. He's a real nice person, General Bradley was.
Tell me how old you were when you got your orders to go overseas.
Let's see. Well, we had left maneuvers here, and we went to Camp Forest, and we was there for about a week. So I must have been, no, I wasn't 21 yet, because after we maneuvered, we went to Camp Forest, and there we went under the infiltration course. That's where you crawl under the barbed wire, and they're firing machine guns from each corner. So if you want to commit suicide, all you got to do is raise up.
So by this time, it's 1944, right? About 44, you were 20, 1944.
No, I went in 42.
Went in at 42, so you were 22 now. Okay.
21.
21. You got your orders to go overseas. Where was your first place to go? Or let me back you up really quick. Had you heard by this time, it's 1944?
43.
43. The war was well underway. Concentration camps were.
I'd never
You
heard of it.
nothing. 3 to 4 years so far of millions of Jews have already been killed by now. You hadn't heard anything.
No.
What was your understanding of your duty when you went overseas? What was your understanding of what you were going to do?
Do whatever the officers told me to do.
I mean, as far as what was the overall mission, what was your understanding? Was to.
Just do whatever I was told.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
what every soldier does.
Right. Did you understand at all what the overall mission would be for the Americans going over there, not just you personally? You were
Well,
going over to apprehend the Germans.
We had to win.
Right. Okay. So you basically had no understanding about the Jews at all, only that you had to go in and you were to win. Okay. So where was your first stop when you got overseas?
We landed at Glasgow, Scotland. So we left Camp Shanks, New York, on the Queen Elizabeth. There was 22,000 soldiers on the Queen Elizabeth. Traveled by herself, no convoy. And we crossed the Atlantic in 5 days, side coast of Scotland.
Wow.
She's no convoy, so she's too big, and they just took a chance. She had just changed courses and all. And they said that a submarine couldn't catch her, the speed of the Queen Elizabeth. But they could lay in wait on her, though. That's what we were scared of, But I was glad to get off that ship, I know that. But we didn't have any bad weather going over. I hit the bad weather coming back, 45.
So you got there?
And we got off the ship, and then we got on a train, and we went through Scotland, on down to England, to Bristol, England. And that's where we stayed, and that's where First Army headquarters was. It was in a college. Can't think of it right now, but I've got it written down at home, the name of this college. First Army had taken it over, and everything was evolved. We drove all over England, because a lot of, I forget how many millions soldiers were there at the end, begin with, But we drove back and forth to London, to Bristol, England, and then different places in England, Torquay, and I can't think offhand.
It's okay.
But wherever an officer wanted to go, he told us, and we took him. And it was really a change when we started driving on the left-hand side of the road. I didn't
It
think
is something different, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't think I'd ever, but it just fell right in. But I was just lucky. Of course, I guess because I was young,
When I did it when I was in London, I kept leaning because I kept feeling more comfortable. So I would drive like this just by nature of
Yeah.
leaning over.
But I really admired the British people. I know a lot of them didn't like us, and I don't blame them. We were young, smart alecks. Everything that they had, we had something better. you know. And their pay, I was a private, and I made as much money as a British lieutenant. So we had plenty of money to spend on the girls over there.
So
Take-
you're in Europe now.
Yeah.
You've been in
Bristol.
Europe for a little while. You're in England. Still, have you heard anything?
No,
Still nothing. Not rumors, not scuttlebutt anywhere,
No.
nothing.
we were in England 8 months before the invasion. And then we moved the last of May. They split our company up into 3 echelons. The forward echelon, the supply, and the base. And I was picked to be in the forward echelon. There was 24 of us. And we went down near the coast, Falmouth, and we had tents there, and it was an embarkation area. And you waterproofed your vehicles every day, and then you come back in, and they fed you real good. Even fed you fresh eggs for breakfast. Never had it before. Steak or chicken for lunch and supper, you know. And we were there about nearly a week, I guess. And this major called, he didn't call everybody there together, but my group he called together. And he said, I want to talk to you people. He said, you people have been chosen for part of the task force for the invasion of the continent. And you could have heard a pin drop. And he said, there's 2 things I want to remind you to always have with you. That's your dog tags and your what it ended up was it was something you slept in. I thought, put straw in it and sleep in it, see. I slept on a straw thing when I lived in East Tennessee, but what it was your body bag. And you always had your body bag with you to be buried in. That's what they buried. And the dog tags was important because that's
So
how
they
they
can identify you.
identify you. Yeah.
So you knew you had this mission in front of you, still really had no idea other than to go in and win.
I was driving a Weasel. It's built had a Studebaker engine in it. It was like a small tank without a top on it. It had big wide tracks, and it had a little gear shift down here, and you had 2 sticks that you steered with. You want to go right, pull your right one. If you want to go left, pull your left one. If you want to stop, pull both of them back. And that's what I drove off the LST onto this flat bars Rhino, and they pushed us up, I guess, within 100 yards of the beach. We got there D+1. And we'd done been instructed what to do, not to stop on that beach, just slow down, throw your life preserver off, and keep going. And I guess I got the greatest shock I'd ever had in my life than doing just that, see. I hadn't went 20 feet. There happened to be a colonel on there with me. It wasn't a regular colonel I drove. A lieutenant and a captain. They asked me could they ride in with me. I was by myself. I told them to hop on. So they did. And when I got to the beach, I turned left like I was supposed to and went about 25 feet. And this full colonel told me, he said, pull over here. There's somebody I got to see. Well, I knew I wasn't supposed to pull over there. But he's a full colonel and I'm a PFC. Well, I pulled over and he jumped off. And I turned back around and this major was in my face. Combat Engineers Beach Master. He said, get this thing off this beach. So I had to tell him why I stopped. I said, sir, this colonel on here told me to wait here on him. And it's not very nice words he said to me, but he said, I don't give a goddamn who told you to wait here. I'm telling you to get off this beach now. And now's when I got off that beach too. I never did see that colonel again. So I got a little shock there. Nobody had ever talked to me like that in the 8 months that I'd been in the Army.
Welcome to the military.
But I knew that man,
He was serious.
oh, he was in charge of that beach. Your rank didn't mean nothing to him. He was working directly for General Eisenhower. If you'd have been a brigadier general, he'd have told you the same thing. He was in charge of that beach, there's no question
There was
about
no
that.
messing around.
And I never did see that colonel again. But I went in, I didn't go where my company had went because of having to drive them in, because I had to stop and they went on. But I hadn't went 20 more feet. The first thing I seen was this boy laying dead. The 29th Division patch, he's laying there in this ditch. Of course, there's a lot of dead people around, but that was close, see. And all these ships was firing. We were next to the Arkansas going in, but I think it was the Texas. No, they had 14-inch guns on them. And the Arkansas was a World War I battle wagon, and they had 12-inch guns. And then all these planes was coming over too. See, they told us the night before that the next morning was D-Day, and said there'll be 10,000 planes in the sky. And said you'll know our planes because they'll have white stripes underneath the wings. And he said there'll be 5,000 ships in the water, and the paratroopers will start dropping right near midnight, 82nd, 101st. And we heard them coming over us, that night. That's when it all started.
You were a liberator of Buchenwald.
Right.
Tell me about that day.
Well, I had no ID. This lieutenant and I was together. And the first thing we seen was, there's some dead horses, there's some dead cows. And he said, wait a minute, I said, what is this here? And then we seen the gate up there. He said, go in there. And it was Buchenwald. We had no idea that we was going to be in.
Were you with your unit, or was just you and the
Just
lieutenant?
me and this lieutenant. See,
Were you over there on assignment, or wandered over there, or?
no, I was driving him wherever he wanted to go.
Okay.
He was a liaison officer for Colonel Medeiros, who was over 1st Army Ordnance.
Okay.
So wherever he wanted to
So
go,
you two are driving,
and all of a sudden, here
and
it
all of a
is.
sudden, you're in front of this camp.
Yeah.
He told you to open the gates.
No, the gate was
The
open.
gate was open,
Yeah,
and you drove in.
went in. Mm-hmm.
These are the pictures you took while you were driving. That
He,
he took
he
while you were
took-
driving.
yeah.
What were you thinking when you saw this?
I couldn't think. I thought, what is this, And I never will forget an American soldier that was standing there looking, what he said. He said, I don't believe there's a God in heaven. That's what he said. And I couldn't answer him. I just stood there. I'd never seen nothing like this, It's, I bring this up whenever I talk to school. One of the last things I bring up is about this. And I tell them, I said, none of us had any choice of what we would be born. We could have been born Jewish, black, yellow, red. We had no choice about this. The only choice we have is what kind of a person we'll be. And I said, always judge a person for what he is, not his color or not his race. And I always bring that up. But it's always been with me because of this, Now, right after I had went in there, either the next day or a day after that, I was somewhere and this lieutenant came out and they had these German women cleaning up this building. And he asked me, he said, I've got a woman in here that's having a heart attack. Will you take her to the hospital? I said, if you want to go with me. So he said, I'll go with you. And he did. And I drove just as slow as I could, hoping she'd die before I got to the hospital. I said to myself, if you die, you sure can't never have another German. And the American hospital wouldn't take her. So we found a German hospital. And I remember we stopped there and hauled her out there and laid her down on the ground like she's a sack of potatoes and left. I hated them. That's the way I did.
What was your understanding about what's happening here?
I just couldn't fathom it, you know.
By this time, had anybody told you that the Jews had been being murdered and
No.
you still knew nothing? You just
No.
saw people that had been starved to death.
I mean, I look back and I thought, well, it looks like our company commander should have told us, fellas, here in a few days, we're going to be running into a concentration camp. Nothing was said.
Do you have ideas why they never told you?
No, I don't. Maybe somebody told them not to. I don't know. But I just don't have any explanation for it. I'd never seen nothing like it. Never seen nothing like it since either.
You saw the people that were starving.
Yeah, all the people that I've seen had been starved.
You saw the ashes from the crematorium.
That's where they cleaned out the furnaces. They put that on the fields to fertilize.
You saw the oven.
Mm-hmm.
You saw the bodies. You saw the barracks.
Mm-hmm.
Roughly 4 or 5 to a bunk.
Oh, yeah. And like I say, none of them was very strong. You could tell that, you know. But, you know, since then, I've wondered, now this is just my own thinking. What if the cure for cancer laid there? The Jewish people have done a lot in the medical field. Of course, back then, I didn't think about it, and I could say. I thought about maybe the cure for cancer was laying there. They did about diphtheria, diabetes, a lot of these things there.
When you took the picture, or your lieutenant took the picture of these barracks, and you have these people that are walking skeletons, and they're looking at you, and you're driving by.
So there wasn't only Jewish people there.
Right.
There was some other people. Mm-hmm. I remember particular this man, he must not have been there very long because he was healthy. He asked me, did he want me to go with him and show me some things. Well, I knew we didn't have time to see a lot of stuff. But anyway, this fellow, he was a Lithuanian. He told me his nationality. And he took me in this pretty good sized building off from the other part of it. And it had a dirt floor. It was something like you'd have for a horse arena. And he said to me, this is where they brought people at night to kill them. I thought to myself, I didn't see the walls wasn't chewed up, where if they'd used a machine gun or something. He said, oh no, said they didn't use a machine gun. He said they just had them to kneel down, and they come behind them with a gun and shot them in the head. That's what he told me. I couldn't figure out, if they were, they'd line them up, use a machine gun, but they didn't.
He was Lithuanian.
Mm-hmm.
You were American. How did you communicate with each other?
I really don't know. I guess he could speak a few words of English, because I certainly couldn't speak any Lithuanian.
Right. Did he tell you that 97% of the Lithuanian population was wiped out at the time? He probably may not have known.
No, he didn't. He was in that camp.
He was in the camp.
Mm-hmm.
After you and the lieutenant were there, did you communicate with any of the inmates at all?
No.
Had you talked to any of them? Just the Lithuanian?
Some of the inmates, I remember this now, they were laying outside on the ground, and I would kneel down to see if they were breathing. or if they were dead. And some of them were dead, and some of them were breathing. I just was curious, to see, because they wasn't in these piles, see. So,
Had the Nazis already abandoned the camp?
yeah.
They had already left.
Now, I heard later that in this camp, that they had a room back there that this camp commandant's wife had some lampshades, and they had took the skin off of some of them and put on these lamps. Now, I didn't see that with my own eyes. I just heard it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
They did do that. You were there at the camp for how long?
Oh, I might have been there an hour.
You
Not
left.
long.
You
Left.
left with the lieutenant.
And
Where'd you go?
well, we were at Weimar, Germany, the big German army camp. So we had moved in there, and that's where we was at when I went in there. But I never did go back down and go in that camp. I just couldn't do it. But anyway,
Did you tell anybody about what you saw?
oh yeah, and
Did you know they were Jewish when you saw them?
oh yeah,
Yeah, you knew going in.
I knew the Germans hated the Jews.
Right.
Never could figure out why, but they did. Of course, I had led a simple life up until then. Of course, there wasn't many Jewish people even lived in East Tennessee. There were some in Johnson City, and I don't know if there was any in Elizabethton or not. But there wasn't no big population, But it's just, I never had seen nothing like this. I was 20 years old. I've seen dead cows, dead horses, but I'd never seen dead people, And I just thought it'd been much more humane if they'd just shot them instead of starving them to death.
When you think about that experience, I know you said this just unspeakable, and honestly, I'm not looking for you to answer why it happened. But when you look at it, how do you explain to yourself and to your son what that kind of level of evil and inhumanity really means when you think about it?
Well, all he had to do was get about 200 people to believe like he did. And the other people were scared. And then they all started believing like he told them to, But I believed all my life for evil to exist, all it takes is for good people to do nothing.
It's been said, and personally I've always believed this, but it's been said that the Holocaust could have never happened without the help of what they call Hitler's willing executioners. The neighbors, the teachers, the doctors, the townspeople. That the Nazis were a very small part of a very big hate, active hate. There are people that lived outside of Dachau, outside of Buchenwald, outside of various camps, and said they really had no idea.
I don't believe that.
You don't believe that at all?
No. There's too many people there in those camps, Now, Buchenwald didn't have a gas chamber, but those others did have gas chambers. And they seen these trains coming in there, those people. And they said they didn't see any trains leaving there with them. I mean, I just don't buy that. I mean, Hitler was awful, but what blowed my mind is the German people was not a bunch of dumb people. If I understand it, before World War II, we were buying our operating instruments from Germany, and I wouldn't doubt it. They were smart people, smart scientists, machinists, and all this stuff, You couldn't do what was done over there with a bunch of dumb bunnies.
Would you have done anything different in Buchenwald than what you did when you got there? Do you have regrets? Do you wish there was something you did differently?
Well, I could have offered them something to eat, a K ration or something, but they couldn't have eaten it, you know, because they had already tried to feed them, see. But I don't know how many hours it had been since the liberation took place when I got there. It couldn't have been long, because some of these people were still living, laying there on the ground,
They
you know.
haven't been moved yet.
And like I say, I remember those oak buckets with that green pea soup and that black bread. I remember that, you know. But I was just stunned, you know.
You said that the American soldier said it could not have been a God in heaven
That's what he said.
when he saw those piled of bodies. What do you think about that?
I didn't know what to think. I'd always went to church. I wasn't, I guess, as young, I wasn't real religious, but I did go to church every Sunday with my mother, you know. But I just didn't have an action for him, because I'd never seen anything like that, you know. Hope I never see it again. But it certainly had an impression on my life.
60 years later, you still think about it?
I don't dream about it now, but I did dream about it. But I don't, it's odd to me that so many people in this country don't even know anything about it. You know, 6 million people, we don't have that many people in this state, do we?
We don't. That's correct.
That's true.
Under
That's a lot of people.
What do you say to the people who say it never happened? It was an exaggeration. It wasn't really that bad.
I said, well, you ought to have stood in my shoes and you wouldn't believe that way. I know what I seen. I'm getting older now, but I still remember it.
We have liberators that came home. Many of them didn't talk about it to their families. They felt it was so outrageous and they just wanted to put it behind them. How
Well,
did you feel?
You know, I don't think it ought to be put behind us, because it did happen, you know. But I wonder if I had never been over there and had I never seen that, well, how would I have thought? It would have been easy for me to believe that it never happened, I believe. It was so horrible. I'd never seen nothing like this, you know. We didn't treat dogs like this in this country. But I just don't see how you could have much hatred for somebody just because they wasn't your nationality.
Do you think you looked at people differently when you came back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think that experience gave you?
There's one picture that's missing in here. I used to let people have those pictures to take to school and whatnot, you know. And for some reason, one picture got lost. But I remember exactly what that picture was. It was a pile of Jewish people laying there dead. But there was 2 Germans laying there dead, SS soldiers. Had the mark of the SS right here. And they had pajama bottoms on, but no top. And these 2 had been beat and had been hung. You can see the print of the rope there. And they were laying there with those Jewish people. Well, I don't believe the Jewish people there done that. I've got a pretty good idea how that happened. The first Americans that got there, they must have come real early, because those Germans were still in bed. And that's who helped do that. They didn't have the ring on that I've got right there. They didn't have one of them rings on, but they had that mark right there. That's the mark of the
On their
SS.
chest?
Huh?
On their chest?
Yeah, right here in the middle. It's branded on there.
There were some liberators in another camp that had turned over guns to Jews, the healthier ones that could move, and allowed them to kill some of the Nazis. How do you feel about that?
I think it's fine.
One liberator said it was the only thing he could do to give some small part of power back to the Jews. Go back and tell me what you told me about what this experience gave you, being in Buchenwald for the day.
Well, it just gives you a different view on human beings, you know. I guess before that, I probably was quick to criticize somebody, you know, about things. I was young, and I'm sure I wasn't smart, foolish. But that's what I think it brought to me, is what I've seen there, to never say anything about somebody that's, if I didn't like them because of whatever, you know, their color or their whatever. And I don't think that I have been that way. I think it changed me in that way. Because I guess before I would have probably said something, well, not if somebody hadn't done something to me or something like that, you know. But it always amused me to hear people criticize the Jews. And this way is what I told them. I said, well, stop and look at it this way. I said, there's none of them on food stamps. They all work. There's none of them in the penitentiaries. And I said, the girls are not in the prostitutes business. I said, they must be doing something right. That's what I told them.
Is there anything you'd like to add? Maybe I didn't cover today that you'd like to share? Any feelings about anything?
I can't think of it.
You've been a wonderful interview. This has been such an honor for us to share this with you.
I hope I haven't told anything wrong.
No, there was no, you were wonderful.
I don't want to keep my son too long. He's been sick. He needs to get home.
We'll get him home.
How'd you come to Tennessee? You were always born in Tennessee? Did you ever live anywhere else?
Now, I'll tell you how I got to Tennessee. When I was on maneuvers here, I met my future wife. Her name was Ruth Thorne. She lived in Old Hickory. And I was out one day and I was looking for girls. And I seen her and I asked her, did she want to come over and help her mow the yard? She was mowing the yard. She said, yeah, come on over. And I hadn't been with her 2 minutes till I knew that was the girl I wanted. And I went overseas, and she went in nurses training at St. Thomas Hospital. And when I came home, she still had a year to go in nursing. Well, you didn't get married then, or they kicked you out of school. But I didn't want to marry her then anyway, because there was no job and nothing, you know. But we courted for, she graduated in '46, and then I lived in East Tennessee, and she lived in here. About 48, I think it was, 47 or 48, I done give her an engagement ring. And she told me, she said, Harry, said, I've been thinking about this. Said, I don't believe that we ought to get married. I said, well, if you don't think we ought to get married, I said, I know we shouldn't get married. And she gave me the engagement ring back. I kissed her goodbye. And I said, if you ever want to see me again, you can call me. And a year later, she called me. We've been married 54 years.
That's a great story.
That's what happened. But I didn't get mad when she told me didn't want to marry me, you know.
You weren't hurt at all.
I was hurt, but I didn't say nothing. You know. I said, Harry, keep your mouth shut. But when I went back home, I went with girls all during this year, see. But I might give myself a good talking to. I said, now, Harry, go with the girls, have a good time, but don't you even let the word marriage creep in the back of your mind. You still got Ruth on your mind, and you just be running yourself and another girl. So, but that happened.
Wow, that's a wonderful story.